Okay, so let's go through glycolysis. All right, so glycolysis literally means the splitting of glucose. So glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm, and it's anaerobic. So glycolysis can occur without oxygen available, but it can also occur if oxygen is there. It just doesn't use any, okay? So if we start with glucose, if you remember, is a 6-carbon molecule. So 6 carbons. Glycolysis basically occurs in 2 phases. The first phase of glycolysis basically requires ATP. So we're going to expend ATP in order for this to go. The second phase of glycolysis is where we actually create ATP. Okay? So pathway starts where we take an ATP, we take a phosphate from it, and it becomes ADP. Remember, ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and ADP is adenosine diphosphate. So we had 3 phosphates here, now we have 2. So we take that phosphate that we just stole off the ATP, and we link it to here. All right, so we stick it to there. Okay, so this is glucose 6-phosphate. We'll assume that this is the 6th carbon in this picture. Okay. From there, things get kind of switched around or whatever, and doesn't require any kind of, energy or anything, but it gets switched around and becomes a different molecule. And that molecule is called fructose 6-phosphate. Okay, so it just changes it to that. Once we get to fructose 6-phosphate, we grab another ATP, take the phosphate, and stick it on this glucose. So now we have this. And this is called fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. So the phosphates are on the first and the 6th carbon, bisphosphate, biphosphate, 2 phosphates. Okay, so it's not that complicated. All right, so once we get to here, that's phase 1. We've just used 2 ATP for that. So then it splits. So we split and we get 2 3-carbon molecules, each with a phosphate. Okay, And this molecule is called glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Which we'll see that again. Okay. So now we have two molecules, two 3-carbon molecules. We had one 6-carbon molecule. Now we've got two 3-carbon molecules. So both of these molecules are going to be, we're going to oxidize this thing. Okay. So once it is oxidized, it gets oxidized down to and this is both are going through this. So both are being oxidized. And mainly we're taking away that phosphate group on both of these things. And when we do that, we're not expending energy, we're actually kind of gaining it. So we do have we have ADP, and we're taking these phosphates and linking them to ATP. Okay. All right. And okay, so ADP to ATP. And this is basically through something called substrate phosphorylation, which is basically you're just taking the phosphate and sticking it on the adenosine diphosphate and getting adenosine triphosphate. All right, so you're getting that, and this is happening, for both molecules, and we get 2 ATP for each molecule. Okay, so it happens twice, and we get 2. And it happens again. And we get 2. Okay. We also get in this we have an NAD, and we end up with an NADH, and we end up with 2 of those. Okay, so we ended up with 4 ATP and 2 NADHs, 2 high energy electron carriers. Okay, and then in the end, what we end up with is pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon molecule. And we've got 2 of those. Okay. All right, so pyruvate is the important molecule here. So pyruvate, what happens to pyruvate? Okay. Couple things can happen to pyruvate. Let's bring this up here. So we get 2 pyruvate, which is 2 3-carbon molecules. And if we have oxygen, if oxygen is available, then pyruvate will go to the mitochondria. For aerobic respiration. Okay? If there is no oxygen, so let's say there's no oxygen available, then the pyruvate goes through fermentation. and we get lactic acid. Okay, so once we have lactic acid, the lactic acid then goes back to the liver, and the liver can convert that lactic acid back into glucose. In a muscle cell, when this occurs, you've got glucose, which goes to pyruvate, which goes to lactate. So if we look at a muscle cell, we've got glucose to pyruvate to lactate, and then it goes to the liver cell, and the lactate goes to pyruvate. The liver converts it to pyruvate, and back to glucose. And it's just a big cycle around and around and around with a muscle cell. This is called the Cori cycle. And that's what helps muscle cells maintain a fuel source. Okay, so with glycolysis, so we'll go up here. So in glycolysis, we end up net. Okay, so 2 net ATP and 2 NADHs. That is what you get from glycolysis. Now you created 4 ATP, but remember we used 2 in the first phase. So net-wise, you have to subtract that out. So we only have 2 that we actually gained of ATP and 2 NADHs. So not very efficient. Okay, this is anaerobic. This is going to be dominant. You know, this is how your body's going to want to or get sugar in anaerobic activities. Okay. All right, so what happens then in the mitochondria? Well, that's where we go into the use of the citric acid cycle and the electron transport chain. So let's go to the citric acid cycle.